festivals and things like that, which bring people together, like the Caribbean Festival, the Asian Games, and the Godiva Festival, and making public services approachable, such as the police, making Coventry a safe place that people feel they can go out in. It's so just rolling through some of the things. A very connected place, so connected to the key sites, so the Ricoh Arena, to the hospital, but also to the city centre, which was felt as a key place where there should be a vibrant place. Talks about different sort of transport systems and the infrastructure. Sorry, I'm just touched on health, the hospital and the sort of local clinics. Talk about the cathedral and the space around that and how that's a really good place for the city. Looked at students and how they would fit into the centre, where they should be. Should they be in the centre? Should they be dotted around or on a campus? That Coventry should be a forward-thinking city. It should be very technology-focused and looking out. That we need to sell Coventry. It's not just a place near Birmingham. It's a great place. Sell some of the benefits and the advantages of Coventry. I think that's... Oh, we talked about the river. Which I didn't know there was, but there's a river. So there we are. That's a very, very quick summary.
So every day is a school day.
Hello. Lots and lots of the same sorts of things. We also talked about the Godiva Festival. We also talked about the German food market, the German Christmas market, and the Caribbean Festival, and was saying how great they were and how we'd like to see more of those sorts of things. And we'd like to see them also have more of them in the city centre. We had something I felt kind of summed up a lot of our discussion. Somebody said shopping in Coventry is rubbish. And then we had a lot of discussion about that and what could be done about that, and discussions about encouraging more small businesses to relocate to Coventry or to be supported to grow in Coventry, but also attracting larger shops and smarter chains to the city centre. We also talked about condensing things, so that you would go to one area and you would have everything you needed in that area, shops, restaurants. And we talked about developing more interest areas, so having a place where students could go, where it would be safer to go out clubbing and to do the sorts of things that we decided it's not normally young people, but some people like to do. And other places like a restaurant area, perhaps for not necessarily older people, but the people who don't like clubbing. And that there could be sort of areas that could be generated that would host those sorts of activities and that would be safe. Safety came up time and time again. And that it would be easier to police and safer and therefore attract more people and fewer troublemakers if the places were safer. We also talked about a couple of particular areas that could be used for that, and we were looking to integrate some of the more the Fossil Road, and we talked about bringing some of the wealth of culture that is there and integrating that more into the city, perhaps having some kind of a festival or something again similar to the Godiva Festival. With regards to costs, we had a little conversation about whether people would be happy to pay a small contribution in order to go to the Godiva Festival, and we felt that that might be one way that it could be funded. People were horrified at the idea it might be every other year. Then we also talked about we want the council, whether it's wherever that's based, whichever level that's at, to invest more in Coventry. So we then asked, well, where would they get that money from to be able to invest? And the grand answer was the EU. So we then looked at some of the other possible ways, and that's where we came up with that. So that's where we got to with that. We want more investment. We're not quite sure where it could be from. Might be from the EU, might be from people paying sort of voluntary bits, things like a couple of pounds to go to the Godiva Festival. Other than that, we want more investment, and we're still working on where it would come from. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Kelly, it's all right, I'll bring the mic to you. Roving mic, see? I can row you over here.
Ooh. Wonderful, thank you. Okay, so we started talking about the city centre. We started talking about neighbourhood, first of all. And we started talking about the places that seem to have hubs in local areas and wards. So these could be green spaces where people just went to sit, like parks, or there could be sort of rows of shops that have green spaces outside. But that hub idea was a thing that seemed to bring people together. But what was missing, it wasn't so much the neighbourhood level that was an issue. It was sort of the city being connected together, and people that lived in different areas and wards of the city feeling like they had, for example, a sense of ownership or had a place in the centre of the city. And one of the ideas we came up with, or the group came up with, was the idea of taking the subways around the city and giving, I mean, this doesn't have to be ward, because not everyone, I think, agreed that ward was the best way to sort of divide the city, and people have different ideas of where they live. That's not necessarily ward-based, but to give different areas of the city a space, to bring together groups of volunteers, to perhaps decorate a subway that sort of showed the identity of the area of which they live, and that would sort of give them a little space in the city centre where they could express that they are a part of it. And someone also mentioned that perhaps we could put across the idea that Coventry is a city of festivals. And there were conversations about some of the things that already happened. I know Godiva's been mentioned loads, but there were issues there with people being concerned that it's a certain demographic that goes to that. It's not really something that brings the city, everyone in the city together. But perhaps something like the Coventry Carnival, which used to exist, maybe something like that could be brought back. And I think it was maybe 30 years ago that it was told it exists, but it seemed to bring people out of all these different parts of the city sort of together, just for a day, I guess it was. And also green spaces, they came up a couple of times. Green spaces seem to be something that brings people together. And I asked the group, do you go to the city centre? If you don't go to the city centre, why not? And what do you do when you go there? And it seemed that people felt like they didn't really have a reason to go there, apart from sort of to shop. They didn't feel like there was a civic space where they would gather, or a place where they would go to sort of talk about issues and make decisions. And they felt that the city centre was a space that had quite a transient population, so a big student population, and perhaps there was sort of not really a sense of community because of that, or at least they didn't feel connected to that community if it did exist. We also talked about stuff like communication and how people find out what's going on around the city, and came up with an idea. And that idea was one central place, which perhaps the council could sort of put the resources starting, but that was owned by communities, and communities were responsible for updating it. And I got the impression that there's a couple of things that sort of exist to that, but not on a large city-wide scale. And there isn't one place when people want to know what's going on in Coventry that they think, I need to look at this website, or I definitely need to look at this publication that we all get. So there's definitely a need for communication to be improved, but for that to be owned by communities and community-led. What else was there? Do you think that sums up fairly what we said, group? Yeah? Okay, well, group are happy.
Okay, so we have about another 20 minutes or so of discussion. So can I just ask you to, as I say, start at the place that you weren't. So if you started local, go global. If you started global, go local. If you started in North London, end up in Coventry. If you, like John, disappeared all over the place, carry on disappearing all over the place in different and interesting ways. And at just after past, we will get back together for one last quick summing up. I will then tell you more about what happens next, and then that will be that. Thank you very much indeed for your contributions so far. Enjoy the rest of the conversation.